Would it be reasonable to say that, let's say you were born into a very, very, very unloving household.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say there was religious dogma, there was physical abuse, it was bad,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
You're going to grow up with a lot of fear.
Mm-hmm.
So could you say that their free will is, in a way, to an extent limited because it's so much more difficult for them to make loving choices than from someone who's been born into a really loving family, who's made it clear to them, you know, what God's love is, and they follow in the divine truth path? And
Yeah, well, I actually find it almost the opposite to that. What I've found a lot of times is that people who have been brought up in very unloving environments often at least have a consciousness that they need to fix something in order to make their lives better. And as a result of that, they become more self-aware. And then in the process of becoming more self-aware, they notice their fear. And so what I often find is it's the people who have lived a relatively normal life that struggle when it comes to their relationship with God, and also struggle many times with their growth in love, because they've received a whole heap of things that they think are normal that are not necessarily normal or loving, and they view them as, because there has been very little what appears to be pain created, they live in that life in a very self-satisfied and lack self-analysis. And so I feel that it just depends really
on the individual.
On the individual and the use of their will, their choices and decisions.
Yeah, it's just...
Because I've met some people that are brought up in terrible households, and they're very nice people.
But I teach religious education actually at a school,
Yep.
and so most of the children who tend to be, have problems or aggressive or whatever, you can usually 99% of the time trace it back to something going on in the family. So
I agree, but let's just for a moment have a short discussion about children versus parents, shall we? Or children versus adults. Yeah. All of these discussions that I'm having with you about will are really referring to adults. Okay. Because the reason why it's a little bit different for children is because children's will is largely defined by the will of their parents as they are formulating their life. So from the ages, in particular from the time they are born to 7 years of age, their formative processes and their intellect is being developed. And as a result of that, whatever the adults in their environment do to them, or say to them, or feel towards them, they begin to reflect. Mm-hmm. When you take them out of that environment and put them in a different environment, you can get them to reflect some different things as a result of that. And the reason why this is the case is because children are often reflecting their environment, and therefore they don't have a developed sense of their will. So that's very different to us as an adult, where we've left home. We're now, basically our life is under our personal decisions and control, compared to a child who's still being, you could say, disciplined by its parent into a certain way of thinking or feeling. Now, the problem that we have as a society is that it would be preferable that we release the children from all of these negative influences.
Which we do sometimes.
Right, which would be fantastic, right? To release them in particular from all of the unloving choices that we ourselves as adults make. However, for that to occur, we as adults must learn how to use our will in harmony with love before the children will be able to respond to such a thing. And this is why it's so important that we focus on the adults first in terms of developing will, and this will help the children be free to develop a sense of their own will at a much younger age, and also be able to then not be infected by the environment in which they live. Although I must point out one thing, and that is this. The children tell us how unloving we are through their behaviour and actions. So in other words, they are almost a feedback system that God has designed, and if we are unwilling to change ourselves for the sake of our children, then it's highly unlikely we will be willing to do it for anyone, including ourselves. So what I suggest is that look at what's happening to our children, be willing to see the direct relationship between what we do as adults and how it affects our children, and then help our children, if they're not living in our own home, in your case at a school or whatever you're teaching, they're coming from other homes. Help your children engage their free will, but understand they have limitations because their will is being already controlled by their adults in their environment. And until those children release themselves from such an environment, it's highly unlikely that that much positive outcomes will occur.
Yeah, because what we'll do is give them counselling or give them therapy, or in my lessons I'll be like, you don't have to become like your parents or whatever. But then they go back to the what I'd love to do is get the adults in and then just work with them through their issues, and then that would stop it at the source. But that's probably.
And if we were really bold in society, we would not allow such adults to actually continue to have these children. If we were really bold, we wouldn't do that. What we would do instead is we'd place them in a temporary loving environment while we work on the adults and their unloving behaviour. And then once the adults want to be loving to their own children, then say, here's your children back, be loving to them this time, But we are afraid of that as a society. And one of the reasons why is because we have huge definitions as a society of what it means to be a parent. And they're my children. We have a deep degree of ownership over children as parents. And this ownership that we have is terrible with our children, actually. Because what it means is that there are many people on the planet who still believe that it's okay to kill your child under certain circumstances. And by the way, when I say many, there are millions of people on this planet who believe that this is okay, to be able to kill your child under certain circumstances where they don't agree with your beliefs. Like honour killings, for example. An honour killing is killing a child for a thing that they have done that didn't agree with your beliefs, right? And so many of us are willing to go to that extent in order to force our will upon our children. And that means that many of us are willing to believe that we own them, that they are ours, that we have the right to determine what they do. And that is not true. They are brothers and sisters of ours. In other words, we are all children of God, and they are our so-called children are really our brothers and sisters. And we do not have the right to harm their free will choices like we do. But many parents, the majority on the planet actually, believe they do have that right. And until that changes, things are really not going to change in terms of children being happy. But if we remember that any discussion about free will, we have to speak first to the adults. And in fact, in your case, if we were really focused on fixing the problem, we would not shy away from addressing the adults. And in fact, as society, we would say, no, this is all the problem of the adults. And in fact, almost every teacher that I've ever spoken to says, I am tired of dealing with problems that come from the adults in the home environment, right? And so they're trying to fix up the effects in the child when the cause is, as you say, the adults who are damaging the child. It would be far more effective in an environment to fix the cause, which is the adults. But all of us are afraid of biting that off because of how much rage and other emotions you'll get from the adults when that's bitten off, right? And so what we do is we try to do our best with the child, which is just the effect-based problem, rather than fixing the thing with the adult. Yeah. And this is the thing we need to understand even as a society, that the choices and decisions we make as a society affect every child that comes into the world. Every new soul that comes into the world is affected by these choices and decisions. And this is why we need to talk more about what is the loving use of our will, in terms of what we do.